So, good afternoon and welcome to the weekly live of the European Training Foundation, which is called Learning Connects. I am most pleased to welcoming you to this Wednesday's conversation, which is still part of our weekly campaign about skills for the green transition. Today we're tackling a topic which is affecting actually most of the world's population, because we're talking about cities, and indeed the focus is skills for green cities. I'll go straight to our guests because time is short. So I'd like to welcome Eva Bernard, Principal Advisor on Gender in Green Economy and Climate Action at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Welcome, Eva.
Thank you very much, Daria, and very nice to meet you all.
Thank you for being with us. I'd like to welcome Temur Akhmedov, international expert in energy efficiency from Uzbekistan. Thanks for being with us, Temur.
Thank you very much, Daria, for inviting me.
And I'd like to welcome my colleague, Anastasia Fetzi, expert in human capital development at the European Training Foundation, and actually coordinating our project on green skills. Thanks for being with us, Anastasia.
Thank you, Daria, and hello to all of you who are with us today.
So, as we always do every week, please write in the chat where you are from. Let us know your names, the country, the city from which you are sending your comments. And in case you have any questions for our speakers, please send them and we'll take them on board. One important note, our interviewee, Temur Akhmedov, would need to leave in half an hour. So if you'd like to address questions more specifically to him, please send them over. So we can take advantage of his presence with us. And we actually thank him for being connected from the JFK airport in the US. So thanks a million for being with us. Let's go straight to the business then, and I'd like to begin, ladies first, with Eva from EBRD, because we know, Eva, that EBRD is doing a number of things to support inclusion in the green transition. Could you please explain to our followers what you are doing in this field? Over to you, Eva.
Of course. So, let me say first, how delighted I am, to be part of the conversation, today, and it's really a pleasure, to be discussing with you all and to be connected, to this event. So, indeed, and so EBRD has been doing a lot of things on green climate action and also on inclusion, and over the past 1 or 2 years as well on the nexus, basically, of green and inclusion. So let me start first to say and to share how what we've did and what we've put that in practice. So first, the bank has had an engagement over the past years to become more green. And today we pride ourselves on being a leading green bank. And for instance, in 2019, it was a record year for EBRD engagement toward environmental sustainability. And we had 46% of our investment for the whole bank that were qualified as green. At the same time, we've also worked on being, on promoting the inclusion agenda. So we've had an economic opportunity and a gender opportunity, a gender equality strategy for the past years, and as well our agenda on inclusion has become even more important. We've invested almost 14 billion to date in projects that create equal access to jobs and skills for women, including those in entering market, also entrepreneurship and finance, as well quality, accessible and affordable services. So we have these several topics of focus, and it's really what we want to put at the forefront. So we focus on skills as part of our inclusion agenda, and And if I may say as well a few words on some recent initiatives that are on the nexus of environment sustainability and economic inclusion. So the first is a recent green and gender agenda, under which we look at green skills for all, and in particular for green skills for women to participate more in the renewable energy sector. In countries, in cities in particular, and so on. And for instance, we also have another initiative called Just Transition, where we focus on carbon-intensive regions and on reskilling basically the workers that were in these regions. So EBRD has been working a lot on climate action, on inclusion over the past years. It's really an area of priority for us. In the new green economy transition approach adopted last year by the bank, gender and inclusion are mentioned. We're currently working on a new equal opportunity and a new gender strategy where climate change will also be an area of focus. And our board, at the end of last year, of 2020, identified 3 priority areas for the work of the EBRD in the next 5 years: green, inclusion, and digital is the third one. So there's a lot of work to come and a lot of things that will be able as well to share over the next years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eva, for presenting the activities. I know it's very difficult to present all that you are doing, that you have been doing in such a short time, but we'll surely get back to what you've just mentioned. And indeed, 46% of investments qualified as green is an impressive fact. But now let's go to a country. Actually, a country in which the European Training Foundation has been working for many years as one of the partner countries of our agency. So we go to Uzbekistan with Temur Akhmedov, and we are actually very curious to know more about the perspective of a country that is leading towards the green transition. Temur, could you please share with us what are the trends for Uzbekistan in moving towards a greener economy and society from your perspective as a professional expert? Temur.
Sure. I do appreciate participating in this meeting and sharing the insight from the sort of boots on the ground. I consider myself a practitioner of energy efficiency and green building. I've been working in the United States mostly, but over the last year and a half, been developing these concepts in Uzbekistan. So Uzbekistan, since the transition to a new administration 3 years, almost 5 years ago now, had started dramatic changes. Economy was opening up, lots of construction industries developing, economy is booming, and any sort of rapid growth like that obviously has its own challenges. For example, quality of construction. When rapid construction happens, it's hard to maintain quality, it's hard to oversee the quality. Plus, as a link to the whole conversation about the skills, you need to have skilled professionals who can actually inspect the facilities, who knows they know the standards, they can survey, and they can say yes, the building meets the standard or doesn't. So there's a shortage of that. There are a set of laws that were put forward related to energy efficiency and renewable energy, and some of those laws are moving very slowly, the implementation of those laws. Again, there's a challenge of the not having sufficient professionals. For example, there were set a couple of laws and some regulations related to specifically to energy efficiency, energy audits for buildings, but there are no certified energy auditors in Uzbekistan. So while there is intent, there's good intent, and there's understanding that there is a need for that, there is a shortage of people with those skills, that knowledge, to actually implement, to act on that intent. However, within this whole picture of challenges, there are some positive developments. First of all, when massive construction projects happened and trees were cut and very dense construction happened, people gradually started getting involved. And just recently, for example, there was a program launched, Green City Bukhara is one of the cities in Uzbekistan, where it's strictly a non-profit organization promoting it, crowd-funded, local businesses are supporting, with the support of the government, but more sort of on a moral. I apologize for that.
No problem.
So over the last 6 to 8 weeks, they planted over, I think, 2,500 trees already. So that's a dramatic improvement. Some of the projects that we've done on the behavioral side with schools, when we surveyed kids, for example, it identified that the kids see the environmental problems around them, whether it's trash in the streets or other types of pollution, and they see that as humans we're causing it, and therefore there's a trend, there's a possibility to make an improvement through that behavioral aspect, that there is part of the population that want to be involved. And the last thing, I guess, since the country opened up, more people traveled abroad. They saw how life is outside. They learned about the recycling programs, greening programs, parks, and whatnot, and they're bringing those ideas back to Uzbekistan. Just like myself, I brought ideas back to Uzbekistan from my work. So these are recycling programs that are heavily volunteer-driven, heavily driven by non-profits. While every program needs to have governmental support in Uzbekistan, government usually does not assign any resources. So they will have to find resources either through international organizations or through crowdfunding. So those are kind of positive trends there. On the construction side, the builders started, there's understanding growing that in order to invite international companies, you have to utilize green building standards, because international companies require certain level of performance from their buildings. So these are just some of the trends.
Thank you very much, Temur, also for really taking all your flexibility for being with us in this short time that you have available today. Indeed, one of the issues that we will also tackle as a European Training Foundation at our upcoming conference next June is indeed the provision of the necessary skills for undertaking the arising jobs required by the green transition. We'll go back to you before you have to leave in the next 20 minutes on the behavioral aspects, because I know that you have a very interesting background, Temur, which I think can be also of inspiration for many people who are following us. But before that, I'd like to go to my colleague Anastasia for framing a bit more the discussion within the European Green Deal, which was released on December 2019, and which is aiming at making the EU the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And in this discussion, of course, cities are key actors to ensure the transition towards a climate neutral society. But what is it in there for cities from the EU neighboring countries? How would this affect, and what's the role of the ETF in this? Anastasia.
Thanks, Daria, for giving me the task to frame a discussion that is unframeable. Because in the meantime, in the last months, I think that all this discussion about greening, not only Europe, but internationally, it has tackled everything, every aspect of what we do and how we do it. So it will be a little bit difficult, to frame the discussion. But I think that the European Green Deal, as we have said already in the previous sessions, it is a a strategy. It is a policy which is overarching for the future development of the European Union, and which tackles not only all internal EU policies, but also policies that have to do with other partners, non-European partners, so external relation policies. And this is done in several ways. One thing I would like to highlight is that the European Green Deal adopts an approach which we can say it is a whole of government approach. So everybody has to work to the same direction. And in this respect, the role of the regional local authorities, it is extremely important. I mean, they are those who are in the front line. They are those who have direct relations with citizens. And in the trend that we see also in our partner countries, this trend towards giving more responsibility to local level makes the two pieces combining together. So what we see in our partner countries, it is that urbanization is progressing almost everywhere. So despite the fact that we would expect people to leave big cities, actually this is not happening in most of the countries, as I said. We see that the cities are facing more problems because of this. There are issues of social cohesion, of governance, of transport, of waste management, tackling very much environmental issues. So it is very important that local authorities take the lead in this new situation, because they can be more motivated, incentivized to act, but also because they have an interest to improve the life of people who live in the big in the cities, bigger or smaller. Yeah. Also, we see that in the countries of Middle East, there is in the last years with the refugee crisis, the cities have been really under a very much burden. I mean, it's not a burden as human beings, but they have to make a lot of efforts indeed to ensure that these people are well accepted, well received, live decently, and also for the local population to continue living in ways that are sustainable for everybody. So tomorrow is Earth Day. When I was looking a little bit the Earth Day organization website, there also I saw that there is such a big initiative about greening cities. At the EU level, we have the Green City Award. So this aspect of greener cities, it's at the end of the day is the habitat of Homo sapiens, I have to say, that has to be improved and become better. So we expect more action from the cities in our partner countries, and of course we will be there with them together with other actors, and we will hear from Eva also what EBRD is doing on that to support, in particular, on ensuring that people have the right skills to go forward into cities which are smarter and they're more livable.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. Indeed, now we'll continue on this focus on cities. Just before going back to Eva, I'd like to thank some of our followers which are saying hi. We have Sishin from Turkey. We have Abdil from Algeria, Zara from Tunisia, Arafat from Palestine, Orna from Israel, Afaf from Marseille, Abdi from Turkey. So the conversation is really being shaped around the European countries and the European neighboring countries, which we are very pleased of. Eva, we know that the EBRD has got a flagship program called Green Cities. Could you tell us a bit more about the program and how the topic of skills, like Anastasia just mentioned, enters in the picture? Eva.
Of course. Thanks a lot again. So indeed, like EBRD has a flagship program called the EBRD Green Cities. The program has already like 45 cities in which we're like EBRD, with which EBRD is working. And it's across EBRD regions. So Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Balkans, and Northern Africa. we have an objective to reach 100 cities under the Green City programs by 2024. So it's an ambitious program which works very well at the bank, and that we promote like a lot. So I don't want to repeat here some of the figures that Anastasia just shared, but the main rationale behind the program is that urban population is growing, and we know that more than 70% like of the world population will live in urban area like before 2050. We also know that cities are key when we look at environment sustainability, because they have a concentration of pollution, they have a concentration of many people living at the same place, of green gases emissions and so on. So they're keys like to work on climate action. And so that's why basically we launched, the EBRD launched like the Green City program. So what does the program do? It's one particular program at the EBRD which works both with public sector and as well with private sector. The initial mission of the bank being the private sector development as well. So we work with the municipality through what we call a trigger investment, and we develop with them what we call a Green City Action Plan. So basically, we'll help the city identify the key priority sectors in which the city can become like greener. So there will be like a ranking with some priority setup, with actions set up, and this will become like a key, basically, reference document. Based on this, the EBRD will work on follow-up investment that will also like tackle basically these priorities areas aligned with the priorities defined in this Green City Action Plan. So the areas in which we invest and in which we can work on the green side of things are green buildings, for instance, or sustainable infrastructure. It can be like green transportation. In many cities, like we promoted like low carbon emission, like buses, metro, electric buses, and so on. We work as well like on waste, water management, on public buildings, and so on. Like so, several like infrastructure sectors. Where does the inclusion and skills part come there? So we also want to promote to make sure that people and citizens, people living in the cities, have the right skill to work in these sectors. And the program evolved last year, and we've slightly changed like the Green City Action Plan methodology at the end of last year, so a few months ago. And we're now starting like to work with the new municipality who joined the program with this new methodology. And we've integrated like this angle of skills and inclusion. So how does it work? So when we work with municipalities, when we develop like this Green City Action Plan, we have part of this work, different assessments that look at vulnerability of people, that also look at, we have a gender assessment, which looks at gender gaps in terms of access to services in the city, which can be how women use transport differently than men, and so on, but which also look at the skills gaps in these sectors. How the offer as well in the city in terms of education, training on this green skills, on this technical area, like is it possible that, or what is the situation in terms of meeting the needs that will be needed if we have like a greener and greener like infrastructure sector basically in the country. So we look at all this, and as well, so this work is starting in several cities already, and in the investments we'll have the opportunity to have an impact on skills and on trainings of young people, women, basically the vulnerable groups or some target groups, so as to say that that could benefit from the transition to a low carbon economy. So if I give as well an example of a project that happened under the Green City, so it was before like this change of methodology, but it's a project that we often refer on and that worked on skills. So we worked with the city of Tbilisi in Georgia to like to promote like environmental transportation, public transportation in the city. So we worked with the main company, like basically like on the like new buses in the city, and we made sure that women could also access these jobs. At that time, when the project started, so in 2016, only one woman in Tbilisi was bus driver in the city. So EBRD leveraged its partnership and its like relationships, I would say, with the private sector to basically partner with with driving schools, ensure that women who didn't have access to these jobs in this sector, which was becoming greener, like thanks to the EBRD investment in that case, had access to these trainings. 25 women were trained, 22 passed the test and were hired by the company. And so basically our green buses also had women with the right skills able to drive all around the city. So that's an example. We start having others. We'll have more in the relatively soon.
Yeah, actually, Eva, I really find your example super interesting, and I invite you to share some more if you don't mind later in this conversation. We just like to go back to Timur because we don't want him to miss his flight, and we've got 7 more minutes before he has to go. So if the ladies, the gentle ladies in this conversation don't mind, we'll take advantage of the next minutes to discuss with Timur, but then we'll go back to you, Eva and Anastasia, also because there are also comments addressing both of you in the chat. Timur, I'll first go to one question which you wanted to ask at last, but since you mentioned earlier on behaviors, I know that you graduated in sociology and you are now dealing with behavioral change as far as energy, let's say clean energy behavior are concerned, behaviors. How do you see Timur skills development can help shaping the professionals of the future, also with a focus to your country, Uzbekistan?
The airport. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. I'm saying I apologize for that extra noise. For an empty airport, this seems to be a very crowded location where I found. So I think for the sake of time, I know you mentioned 2 questions. One was related to the university and one behavioral. I'll kind of combine those, I think, through the lens of behavioral change. Over the years that I worked in energy efficiency, I came to understand that the energy efficiency and at the end even green building doesn't like there is technology component, there is financial component, but the prevailing component is a behavioral, the human component. How individuals make decisions inside the buildings, how professionals make decisions when they design the buildings or remodel the buildings, how the owners and operators make decisions as far as purchasing equipment or operating the building or prioritizing one use or the other. And kind of trying to connect to the points that were mentioned by Anastasia and Eva, when you look at the inclusion, for example, right? There's a concept in green building called universal design, which means the building has to work for everyone. So it is not a building that has been adjusted for people with limited capabilities, but rather a building that works for everyone to begin with from the start. So an easy example, when you have what happens in Uzbekistan quite often, they build a special ramp for people with disabilities to go up, right? That's an extra cost and extra effort. Universal design would assume, for example, a flat entry with a sliding door, automatic sliding door. At that point, it doesn't matter whether a person is blind or a person is on wheelchair or is the mother with a child. It doesn't matter. They can equally access the facility with no problem. So that's just a easy example. And those are decisions. Those are human decisions made by architects, designers, builders when they make financial decisions, whether they want to have the flat entry or they would want to add the ramp for people with physical disabilities. So as it turns out, if we're able to influence the mindset, how people view the buildings, how they view themselves as part of the buildings, and how they view the buildings being for humans, interestingly enough, people forget about it. I often use a joke when I speak to engineers and architects that when they can design a great building with all the bells and whistles, and then humans show up and mess everything up, right? Because it has to work for people. If it doesn't work for people, then it's not a green building. It's not a resource efficient building. You can have the best technology ever, but if it doesn't work for people, people will make adjustments. And that's how we end up with some, LEED certified or BREEAM certified buildings that use more energy than conventional building, because human factor got involved, because people started making adjustments to fit the building to their own needs, because at the start, the architects, designers, and builders did not account for that. So that's where the behavioral component comes in. When we did my first pilot project in 2019 was with 2 schools, and it was co-sponsored by United Nations Program Development Office, Development Program Office. It was behavioral with school kids. And in those schools, through surveys and through interacting with kids, we saw that some strategic push towards changing the behavior can lead to results relatively quickly. Now, the challenging part to make that sustainable, it's a whole different point of methodologies and how you make this sustainable, but there is a science behind it. You'll just have to take my word for it, since we don't have much time. But you can make it sustainable, whether you are recycling inside the building, whether you are using the resources more efficient. The last component here I will throw in is a presidential university in Uzbekistan, which put forward 2 big goals. One is to have most of the buildings, or at least some of the buildings, at the level of LEED Platinum certified. That's probably the toughest standard in the world to reach, LEED Platinum, as one of the green building standards, LEED. And then have the whole campus net zero energy campus. And net zero energy assumes that you generate as much energy as you consume on the annual basis. And 100% of that energy on that campus will be renewable, mostly solar. So, but as we're working through design right now, we're looking at what they in business call customer journey or a human journey, how people experience the building. That's a behavioral component. And that's what will make the building more efficient. And I'm very fortunate, and I saw here there were people from Turkey there. Turkish construction industry has a solid footprint in Uzbekistan. There are some amazing engineers and architects that I'm working with there. I wish we had people from Uzbekistan with those skill sets. There's an architecture team, that's good. But there's dramatic shortage of engineers, for example, to do a challenging project like that. So we're working towards training people, educating. The last 1.5 years, that's what we've been doing. And I think this is the behavioral component we'll have to play, for sure. Equipment is easy. Upgrading buildings is easy. Spending money on that is very easy. Changing human behavior inside the building, that is very difficult, very challenging. And doing it in a sustainable way, it costs substantially less than upgrading equipment, but it has a dramatic impact on how buildings, and for that matter, the entire cities operate. So,
Thank you very much, Temur. I know that you have to rush to catch your plane now, so we'd really like to thank Temur Akhmedov, international expert in energy efficiency from Uzbekistan. In case you have questions for him, please send them over to the chat, and we'll share them with him even after this conversation, which will continue for the next 20 minutes. So don't go.
Absolutely.
Goodbye, Temur, and have a safe flight.
Thank you very much, and I will answer those questions. I wish I had more time, because this is very interesting and very important and very useful. So
to be continued. To be continued, Temur.
All right.
Thanks a million. Goodbye, Temur. Okay, so now this is an only ladies conversation, but we have many comments in the chat. Actually, while Temur was speaking, I was reflecting on the example that you, Eva, had just brought just before he spoke about behavior and also cultural aspects. Because indeed, for example, I assume that what you mentioned about women driving buses is also one of those changes which have to affect the behaviors and cultural aspects of societies. Actually, I see a question to you, Eva, a very simple one from Paul Cochrane on Facebook, who is asking if the case you've mentioned was in Tbilisi, in Georgia. Is this the case? Oh, sorry, you're muted. Just give me a sec. Voila, now you're unmuted.
Okay. Yes, indeed. The bus drivers, the woman bus drivers was in Tbilisi, Georgia. And if I may share as well, so we've extended the project, and we're going to work as well with the city and with the EBRD client on developing an inclusive transportation strategy. And as well, we'll promote, so this time, safety for all in the metro. And thanks to a better data collection system, tracking the incidents in the metro, gender-based violence, and so on. So we'll promote that, and we'll also look at how to enhance women's employment in as metro drivers, basically. So these are things on the pipeline, linked with Tbilisi, Georgia.
Thank you so much. And there's actually another enthusiastic comment for you, Eva, from Gordana, who says, greetings from Skopje in North Macedonia, green city supported by EBRD. Great news today about a new rapid public transit system to help with connectivity, mobility, and air quality in the capital. Another comment for you, Eva.
Yeah. Thank you. And Skopje is also one of our flagship green cities. So yeah.
Thanks a million. And then just to take on board some of the questions and comments which are raising, Setsin from Turkey says industry has to adapt its production towards Green Deal carbon neutrality. At the same time, we have to update the education to adapt to new professions that require new skills and qualifications. And I think that this comment from Cecile, thank you for flagging this, is well connected to a question which I wanted to ask Anastasia, because we're talking about the EU Green Deal and the immense challenge for the skill systems of the countries, which would be tasked with transforming the skills of the population to meet the needs of the transition to carbon neutral economy. But one of the key questions, also when talking about inclusion, addressing inequalities, is will countries with better functioning skills development mechanisms be more inclined towards being greener? Anastasia, what do you think? Because this is linked to what our friend from Turkey is also raising. I think you're muted, Anastasia.
I wouldn't like to make any kind of predictions. Normally there should not be a direct causality between I have better education, skill development system, I go more greener. But there has been some work done by CEDEFOP, our sister agency, where they tried to make a kind of correlation between the skills index, the countries that better perform in skills development with the OECD Green Growth Indicator. Yeah, and they found out that actually countries which perform better in skills development, they are actually also leading in green technologies. So it seems there is a correlation between the two. But this makes sense. I mean, the more developed the skills development systems in the countries are, the more flexible they are, the more adaptable they are, the more innovative they are, the more capable they are to see how changes in the economy and the society, in the technology as well, how these changes are influencing the skills demand, and on the basis of this to try to adapt their occupational standards and then their training program. So the more ready they are to look at these changes, to identify them and respond to them, obviously it will be easier for them to become greener. But this does not mean that the countries who don't have this system already in place, they will not become green. Yeah, this is something that we have also to highlight. I think there is it is very important, the policy drive within the country, the policy drive towards green transition, how fast they adopt new regulations, so to make actors to behave in ways to move into carbon neutrality, and also what kind of incentives they give and to the economic actors, the companies, to adopt new technologies, but also to the training providers to be able to become more adaptive to the changes of the economy. So we should not be fatalistic. I mean, if we don't have the best system of skills development today, does not mean that there are no possibilities that this green transition brings to make the system better. We can even see this drive, for greening as a driver for the education system to adapt faster. And in fact, we see in many countries which the public system or the initial vocational education and training system is not so prepared to adapt to change quickly, that there are possibilities coming from the companies who are becoming more active, more proactive in training their staff, in building training centers for their own staff, but also accepting people who are not their employees. So there are possibilities, there is dynamic, and the only thing, as I said, it was the policy driver. We need policies for this green transition. Only the action of the different actors, which is extremely important, is not enough. Yeah. So and in particular, policies that bring together those who are not converted. Yeah, and those who need, like the SMEs, yeah, like SMEs who need, and they see the economic opportunities probably, but they don't have the possibility to grasp them. So there it is important, the support to these companies to start being part of the transition process, and of course skills development is part of it. So this is what I would like to share at this stage. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. And actually, I think that this is also the right moment to flag. And I also kindly ask my colleague Michaela, who's working in the background, to share the link to our upcoming conference taking place next June, in which we indeed will continue the discussion and the debate also on skills for the green transition and how to make this a real system change, Anastasia. And I'd like to go back to Eva, because what Anastasia just mentioned about working with those who are not converted yet brings to the table also one fact, which is the fact that the green transition process will or could lead to job losses in carbon-intensive industries, which is something we need to take into account when talking about inclusion and people first, while job creation in the growing green sector. So, what does the EBRD do to ensure that people have the skills to participate in the green economy? Maybe also the ones who were operational in carbon-intensive industries.
So yeah, and actually what I'm going to share will build on what Anastasia just shared on the role as well of public sector. So basically, EBRD, on the question you just asked, Daria, is looking at two directions. On one end, we ensure that no one is left behind in the green transition in the transition like towards a low carbon economy. And for this, for instance, so we've launched last year the Just Transition Initiative, which focuses on the carbon industry, like the regions were like intensive and on carbon industries, and where basically we look at reskilling the workers that have been particularly affected by this transition. So if I take the example again on green cities, so actually, like the one of the last green cities, like we started working with, like we've signed an agreement with, is Wałbrzych in Poland, and it's in the southwest of the country, in a region where there used to be coal mines and so on. And what we did is that so we start working on the Green City Action Plan with the municipality. And in this Green City Action Plan, in this GCAP, we've integrated a just transition assessment, which will look at the transition from a carbon-intensive economy towards a low-carbon one that we promote as well with the Green City projects. But we also look at the regional offers in terms of skills, training in the region, what are the people the most affected, and so on and so on. So we've integrated this like in the work with City, but Just Transition Initiative is way broader. And I mean, I'm happy to share I mean, there's some information like on the EBRD website, and we have like teams like working on this exclusively. The second aspect EBRD is working on is making sure that all have equal opportunity to and skills in particular to work in the green economy. And so more like I'm moving from the vulnerability angle towards like the more like opportunity angle as well here. And so for instance, like here, if I can share a project we work on, so we have two major projects called the Renewable Energy Frameworks in Egypt and Kazakhstan, where as you know, actually, like women in this case are not as present in the labor force and in the renewable energy sector. So we've had like several like banking projects promoting renewable energy like in both countries, and now like currently starting last year with the support of the Green Climate Fund, we work on providing green skills for women and to enter this sector. So for this, basically, we're building on our partnerships with the government, with educational and technical institutions, and with as well our private sector clients. So we've started in both countries with an assessment assessing the skills gap for women, the participation of women in the sectors and so on, identifying what were the educational institutions that we could work with and so on. And the idea is to make sure that women are part of these training programs and are present in this institution. And then we'll map some of these women with our private sector clients to give them like a hands-on training opportunities in the renewable energy sector and more on the technical side, because we also know that women are more representative in administrative roles and so on. So we really want them like in engineer role and so on. And then we'll see. And at the same time, we'll also work with the government to see if there are some legal barriers that need to be addressed to promote women's employment in this sector. So it's really like playing with government, education providers, and private sector to promote and to make sure that all have equal opportunities to be part of the new green economy, basically.
Thank you very much, Eva. Government, education providers and the private sector will be also participating in the conversations we'll have next June in our conference, in which reflections on skills for the green transition, for a just transition, will be discussed. Anastasia, will there be any cases reflecting on the links between skills and the green cities, as we've put the spotlight on today, also thanks to our guests? You're muted?
No.
Thank you.
Yes, so our conference is called Building Lifelong Learning Systems for Green and Inclusive Societies in the Digital Era. So this is one element that we did not encounter explicitly in our discussion, is this revolution in digital technologies and how can work together with the green transition. It's not by definition that they will work together, but how we can make them to work together. So certainly in our conference, we will have a lot of discussion exactly about the reconversion of regions, sometimes cities, and how their citizens can be helped to have this green transition successful. As also Eva said, there will be jobs that will disappear, in particular in regions that they are very much reliant on fuel extraction, fossil extraction, or on very heavy carbon industries. So we know that there will be job losses there, and a lot of reskilling will have to take place, but also a lot of innovation. I mean, we have technologies, but we don't have all the technologies. So this technological innovation, it is something that will be ongoing for years, obviously, not only in the digital sphere, but also in other areas. And I think we need both. I mean, we need people to support them to develop their skills and absorb these technologies, but also people who will develop new technologies. So, and this has to go hand in hand with local economic development or sectoral development. So these are the aspects that we will be looking at during this event. But we try in this event to see this green and digital transition in relation to inclusiveness. We cannot dissociate the things. We have to see them together. Otherwise, really, we risk to develop societies who are divided, the winners and the losers. And this is not the spirit of the European Green Deal or all this international effort that is taking place today. It's about people, as also was said before, and it is, of course, environment, people in their habitat. So these are the things we will be discussing in our conference, and also this change in mindsets. Timur mentioned that before, and I think it's extremely important how to think differently on the consequences of our actions, the implications of our actions on the person who is next to us, on the animal which is next to us, on the tree which is next to us, and more generally, what we do, what are the implications for the future generations. I think we have a lot of work to do, each one of us, each one of us to change this mindset and the value system, on a short-term benefit against a longer and broader vision about who we are in the world. So we will discuss these things, and we will be really happy to have all of you there with us in June. It will be for 1 week. So.
Yes, thank you very much, Anastasia. It's like if we can draw some sort of conclusions with by linking all the various inputs that you have greatly shared with our community today. It's trying to apply some universal design principles to the green transition, so that it can be really for everyone and spontaneously and naturally happen as much as possible. I'd like to close this conversation because we're now at 5 sharp Central European time with the congratulations from one of our kind followers, Statis from Moscow, who says, congratulations, very interesting and useful conversation. Thank you, Statis, and thanks to all of you who have been sharing comments and questions with us, and most of all, thanks to the guest speakers of today's Learning Connects, Eva Bernard, Principal Advisor on Gender and Green Economy and Climate Action from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you, Daria. Thank you, Anastasia, and thank you all.
It was a pleasure having you with us, and congratulations on what you've been doing. There were enthusiastic comments in the chat about the EBRD work on green cities. Many thanks to Temur Akhmedov, international expert in energy efficiency from Uzbekistan, who was with us for 40 minutes and then had to take a flight. So thanks, Temur, if you will watch it afterwards. And many thanks to my dear colleague Anastasia Fezzi, expert in human capital development at the European Training Foundation. Thanks for having been with us, Anastasia.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Eva, and thanks, Temur, Biltelkim, and thanks to all of you who have been with us in this discussion.
Thanks a million, and as always, see you next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Central European Time for another conversation about skills for the green transition. Have a nice afternoon or morning wherever you are. Thanks a million, everyone. Bye.
Bye.